Welcome to my contribution for the World Congress on Geology and Earth Science. Let me introduce first myself. My name is Severin Hohensinner. I've been working at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna since 2001. And my specific field of expertise is the reconstruction of fluvial landscapes. That's why my title of my contribution is Changes in Water and Land, the reconstructed Viennese riverscape from 1500 to the present. In my presentation, I will focus on three topics. The first one is the compilation of historical information and geodata for the GIS-based reconstruction of Vienna's Danube landscape. Then the second one is the transformation process of Vienna's Danube landscape since the year 1529. And finally, I will talk about flood risks and strategies for flood prevention in the historical perspective. I guess most of you will know that Vienna is the capital of Austria. And as you can see here in the photo, today, the former alluvial landscape of the Danube River is totally urbanized. And just to get an overview of the situation today in the former Danube floodplain of Vienna, you see the four main water bodies today, which is in the north, the old Danube. The old Danube is the main river arm prior to regulation. Then we have the new Danube. This is a flood bypass canal that was excavated in the late 20th century. And then the Danube as it was straightened in the 19th century. And close to the historical city center, you can see the Donau Canal. This was formerly a natural side arm of the Danube River. And this is between the outer river arms. This is a distance of 5 kilometers. Yeah, for reconstruction of such a dynamic river landscape, like in Vienna, you need several components. First, lots of historical sources. More than 1,000 maps, plans, and historical views were used for that, and also written sources from the early 16th century onwards. Then you have to be familiar with the typical fluvial forms and processes of such a river system. The Viennese Danube River has to be referred as a so-called anabranching river. In historical times, we need information about major floods and the frequency of floods. But we also have to integrate data on hydraulic constructions. Where have they been implemented over time? How long did they exist? Which material was used? And of course, we also integrated data from archaeological findings like bridge remains and geological data. There's only one example for historical source, the very well-known, at least in Europe, well-known city plan from Niklas Meldemann from 1530. It shows the situation of Vienna during the first siege by the Ottoman army in the year 1529. This is only a detail, a view from the historical city over the Danube River landscape. And in the foreground, we can see city walls and towers that can be used as landmarks in GIS. In the background, there's the village of Nussdorf, which can be also used as a landmark in the GIS reconstruction process. Then we have important bridges close to the city, and then that over the main arm, the Tabor Bridge, and the two blue lines show the two main arms of the Danube River at that time. And here the question was, what was the distance between the two river arms? Fortunately, we had additional information from Wolfgang Schmelzl, 1547, and Octavio Baldassarre, 1577. The latter made a detailed survey of the terrain. Yeah, we also search for historical hydraulic constructions we found approximately 2,500, and we integrated it in a GIS database, as you can see here, starting from the 12th century till the 21st century. For the reconstruction process of the river landscape and the transformation process of Vienna, of the alluvial landscape in Vienna, we applied the regressive iterative GIS reconstruction method, which means we start with the best known situation. In this case, it was 2010. And then we went step by step backwards in time, which is the regressive approach. So, for example, 1849 and 1726. And whenever a historical state was reconstructed, when we finished the reconstruction, we got new insights into landscape, certain landscape structures, riverine structures, maybe about landscape structures from the younger time situation, in this case 1849, which we could not properly interpret, and so we had to iteratively revise the younger time situation based on the knowledge from the older ones. This means the iterative revision forwards in time, going forwards in time. And when this work step was finished, we started with the next older one. And once more, after we finished, in this case 1632, we made the iterative revision of the younger time situations. And in total, we reconstructed 14 states of the river landscapes in the last 500 years. Yeah, now let's go. I will provide a short overview of the transformation process. We start in 1529. This is the situation during the first siege by the Ottoman army. As you can see, we have one main river arm, the so-called Tabor arm. It showed a meander bend towards south. Then we have the side arm, the so-called Wiener arm or Viennese arm, and a smaller one, the Wolf arm. But we already have information that in 1455, the main arm was further north, and in the next 70 years, it shifted gradually towards south. Yeah, here's a detail of the reconstruction from a historical city center. We see the medieval fortification system. We see the Wiener arm, the side arm of the Danube River. We see a large tributary, the Wien River. In order to understand the changes in fluvial morphology, we have to look on the flood history. And this chart shows the number of floods per decade. And as we can see, around 1560, there was a peak in the floods. It was an amplified flood activity. And the consequence was a total reworking of the entire fluvial landscape. The floodplain totally changed, and also the channel system. The former main arm, the Tabor arm, showed some siltation, and in the former small side arm was the new main arm up to 1,000 meters wide. Yeah, this was a problem for the Viennese population, because the Tabor arm and the side arm close to the city center was the supply line for provisioning of the city on the waterway. So the Viennese authorities tried to block the new main arm with hydraulic constructions and to guide the flow to the old Tabor arm. But you can imagine this, they had no success, because at that time the methods they used, the technique was not that elaborated. Yeah, some decades later, during the 30 Years' War, we see that the Tabor arm, the former main arm, had already silted up to some part, and the new main arm, the Wolf arm, shifted towards south. And at that time, there was a new development, which we can better show in the situation of 1663. This is prior to the second siege by the Ottoman army. That's why we have these maps, because downstream of the historical city center, the main arm of the Danube River broke through the so-called Prater main alley. This was an avenue in the floodplain. And in order to prevent further erosion of the so-called Prater area, they excavated two artificial cut-offs in the year 1649. But as we can see in the next time situation, 1726, there was no success. Finally, the Danube River broke through to the sidearm of the Donau, what is today called Donau Canal. And in order to prevent further damages, the Viennese cut off several meander bands at that sidearm called today Donau Canal. And it was also the time when they intensified the planning for the new city of Vienna, to urbanize. They thought about urbanizing parts of the floodplain. They made new regulation efforts for that. You can see the detail here, the area that was former the upper section of the Tabor arm, which was the main arm. Now is the side arm, and they implemented several hydraulic construction to improve the flow in this side arm, but it was all in vain. After some years, this side arm silted up once more, and they had to start with new hydraulic works. Yeah, this is the situation around 1780, when we see first systematically planned flood protection measures. These are the black lines here, and several kilometers long. The reason for, we see here how elaborated the flood protection measures were made. This is a detail upstream of Vienna, close to the village of Nussdorf. You see how they made structures for deflecting the current, the flow into the side arm to the city of Vienna and so on. Yeah, why did they start with the flood protection measures? Because once more, here's the chart of the historical floods per decade. We have seen in the 1560s there was a peak of floods, but there was an even greater peak in floods at the end of the 18th century. Between 1768 and 1789, there were 36 floods recorded. 7 of them were real catastrophic floods. And so the authorities were forced to go forward with the construction of flood prevention dikes, the black lines, and additional regulation measures, as you can see here in the detail. They put great efforts in the hydraulic measures at the time. But due to several additional larger floods in the next decade, until 1849, they went forward with the construction of dikes. A lot of smaller dikes, some larger ones. You can see here, according to the black lines here. And finally, in 1849, there was a complex system of local and regional dikes. There were numerous authorities and private actors involved, like landowners and so on. And the consequent event was there was a lack of a systematic flood prevention strategy, which finally showed that this even amplified the danger of floods at that time. As we can see in the next slide, here is what we call Vienna's flood risk spiral, starting at the bottom here with the expansion of urban areas into the floodplain, or maybe changes of the climate or land uses in the entire catchment of the Danube. The Viennese population started with the construction of first dikes. As a consequence of that, the inundation areas and the danger zones shifted to other parts of the alluvial landscapes. So the Viennese responded with the construction of additional dikes. And the consequence was that the Danube showed increasing flood levels. In the next step, the Viennese population had to heighten the dikes and construct new ones. This made it possible to intensify human uses and the urban growth in flood-protected areas. But this called for further improvement of the flood protection measures. And this is the state that we have till today in Vienna. Yeah, after 1849, the flood protection system could not be managed any longer, and so finally between 1870 and 1875 they started with the Great Danube Regulation Program. And in course of the program, a new straight channel was excavated parallel to that. Almost 500-meter wide inundation area was also excavated. And it was the first time that they were able to construct stable bridges. The former bridges were only made of wood. In addition, they constructed new higher flood prevention dikes, and on the other side, on the other riverbank, they heightened the terrain level also for flood protection and to improve urbanization in that area. Yeah, and this is the time when the dynamic nature of Vienna's Danube River had come to an end. As we can see, since the mid of the 15th century till 1875, there were several phases of meander evolution. One phase lasted for 100 to 130 years, and the mean annual meander migration rate was approximately 20 meters per year. Yeah, this is the state at the end of the regulation program, and please have a look on the water form of river arms and the floodplain here as shown with my mouse pointer here in the next decades that have undergone severe terrestrialization, large areas of the water bodies vanished, and finally this is the situation today, or in detail in 2010. As already said, in the 20th century, the new Danube, the flood bypass canal was excavated. Then all flood prevention dikes were improved and heightened, and there is a new hydropower plant also in the Danube. Yeah, and the question is, are the protection measures sufficient in perspective of the new risks of climate change? We will see. Yeah, what we have done, the reconstruction for the alluvial landscape in Vienna, we later extended for larger areas of the today's city of Vienna. As you can see, we can trace, for example, the urban development, the expansion of the urban areas over time. Yeah, and we integrated our reconstructions in the digital atlas of the city of Vienna. Here is the link to the website, to the digital atlas, so everybody can have a look in detail and to superimpose it, to overlay the current city maps. And my conclusions, Vienna's relationship to its highly dynamic Danube was a walk on a thin line, because the access to the riverscape was of vital interest for the growing city. It was the lifeline for the city, but on the other side, the main channel should not come too close to the city because it eroded valuable terrain, partly settlement areas. The problems increased due to climatic and hydrological changes, and the vulnerability of the society increased together with the expansion of the city into the floodplain. The social and economical requirements change over time. The 19th century, the river should be more remote. The flood danger should be remote from the city. Today, the river should be more close for recreation, tourism, and urban development. We see also the story of the Viennese Danube River landscape tells us that decisions and actions of former generations constrict the scope of action today and in future, for future urban planning or for purposes of aquatic ecology to restore water bodies. Yeah, last slide. For those who are interested in that topic, we prepared a special issue in the journal Water History already in 2013. It's open access, you can download it. And several video animations on my YouTube channels. You only have to look for my name, Hohensinner and Danube. Many thanks for your attention.